Hi, do you have a 2D bitmap from your research? Are you about to apply for a grant, publish a paper, or present in a conference and you want to show it in the most appealing way? In this video, I will show you how to go from this to this in just few minutes. Let's go! Okay, so let's begin with our default screen from Blender. We have the typical cube. We will not remove it this time. We will let it use it as the base of our future geometry nodes. But we will prepare some scene in which the geometry will live. Let's start by adding a plane. Scale it 5 times. Then go to edit mode. Select these two edges and extrude in Z direction also 5 times. Now let's select the corners and Ctrl B and move it a bit away. We can control the number of subdivisions with the scroll of the mouse. We keep it like this. This will give us an effect of an infinity wall. Now let's add some lights. Add light area. Grab Y, then rotate 90 degrees in X direction, scale it 4 times, grab it 2 meters in Z direction, and this will look like a window in a room. Let's put it 1000 watts of power. And let's add another point light. Grab it X, a bit far away. Let's give it some radius so that the light is not punctual. It will give some environmental light. Let's give it 2 meters and why not 500 watts. Let's see how it looks now. We have our cube, we have 3 lights, and it looks, we will choose cycles. It looks more or less like that. Let's use the GPU and the noise, our viewport. Now this will be our entry point to generate the bitmap, the heat map. So let's select the cube and go to geometry nodes. In geometry nodes, we go to add new, and we will disconnect the input geometry to the output geometry. This node we will not need anymore because we will create a grid full of points, and on each point we will create one instance. This instance will be an object, can be a bar, can be a cylinder, a sphere, that will have the magnitude or the scale that we will give on the heat map texture or the image that we are going to use. So let's go to search here, and we write grids. We give it 1 times 1 meter, and we will give it, let's say for starting 100 and 100. So we'll have a whole grid of 100 times 100 points that we will fill with some objects. If we connect now here the mesh with the geometry, we will have, and we can press a point, and we will see that now what we have is something like a plane. Let us move this box a little bit to the bottom so that it don't interferes with our geometry. So let's grab it minus 0.001, and that will be enough. Let's select our plane again. Where is it? Now what we want to do is any vertex of the mesh will become a point that then we will use for our geometry bar. So here we search for mesh on points. mesh 2 points. And what we did now is that for each vertex of the grid we added a single point. Now we will add a mesh for each point, or a primitive or a object, a 3D object for each point. So this we will do it by instances on points. These objects I call their dimension, they are called instances. And here on the instance we will be able to decide what we want to put on it. Here we want to add some cubes. And if you see, we have added many overlapping cubes, one per each point of our grid. What we need to do now is diminish the size of those cubes so that we will have a bit less. I will say 0.1, 0.01, and we will have this huge amount of bars on each point of the grid. The next step will be telling Blender that the height of this bar is related to the color of our image. This will be everything that we will need to do. So let's start by importing the image to Blender. This will be very easy. I have prepared some set of heat maps that we will be able to use for this example. I will leave the link with all the heat maps in the link in the description. So it is pretty easy. The only thing we need to do is drag and drop the image. We will choose this one here, which is very complex. We will have a very nice effect at the end. We will keep this, and now what we need to do is telling that the scale of the instances will be related to the color that will come from this image texture. So it is quite obvious. We need to add something called scale, and we have here this node scale instances, which we will connect here, which will be the scale of the instances. We will have scale X, Y, Z. We will need only to affect the scale in the Z direction, which is this one that I'm manually changing here. So we will keep it to 1, and we will add some math node here that we will say multiply scale. We will keep it as 1. This will be helpful in future. And here what we need to do is just modifying the Z component of this vector. For that we need to use the combine XYZ, connect this to the Z. X and Y should be 1 because we want that the scale and in those directions is not modified. And then we just connect it to the scale. We have now already a very nice effect, but we see that the bars are not starting from the ground. So what we need to do is to define a transformation that translates the bars, all of them, to start from the same position from the ground. To this, what we need to do then is now set position. So we need to add a node called set position. And here we can do some offset that will move up and down these bars. Since all pivot points of the bars are the center, what we need to do is move them upwards the half of its own scale. We can do that with another vector, and we can say multiply vector mass scale. We will scale it by the half, so this will be the half of the scale of the length of the bar, and we will move it upwards just the half. so that all of them will start from the ground. Then this one we will need to use a combine XYZ. We will again connect it only to this one. Here it will be 0, and this we can connect to the offset. So we will add an offset, and all of them now starting from the ground as we wanted. Now we can go to the layout again. And here we can press N, view, camera to view, so we can move the camera to our desired viewport. This is already looking pretty nice. Now what we need to do is add a color scale that represents the height of each bar. So let's do it. Go again to geometry nodes. We can even set here the render view. Let's organize a bit what we have done. We can take all these and we can join them as a single group with Ctrl+J. And we can do the same for this group here. Now we can control the height of the bars by changing here. I will just put it to 0.5 so that we don't occlude parts of the height map with too large bars. Now what we need to do to make the color is adding a material. So we will just set material node. We will place it here, then we will define what material is this one. And we need to convert these instances into a mesh in which we can apply the color. For that we need to go to realize instances and we will place it here. So we will have now a single geometry, and we will see that the points or the vertices of this geometry are now defined here. Next to that, we need to displace properly the geometry or the texture that we have defined, because if you see, this is divided in 4 groups. It is not clear from this point of view, but if we look at here, we can see there are some subdivisions here. This is because the position of the texture starts from here, and then it doesn't completely cover our grid. To fix that, what we need to do is to add a position node and a vector math node that will add 0.5 and 0.5. And now we can see that those subdivisions that we used to see here in the center have gone. We have properly placed our texture in the grid. Once we have done that, now let's go to define the material. So we go to the layout and we split the window. Now we can change this one, and we want to create our material. To do that, let's define an attribute input node. This attribute will be a property of our geometry node that we will pass as input for the color range. If we directly connect this one, nothing will happen because we haven't tell Blender which attribute will be. In this case, we will need to add the height of the bar as an attribute, or in other words, the color of the texture that we are using. To do that, let's go back to the geometry nodes and let's capture this attribute that we are using as height. This will be directly from here because it is already from 0 to 1, so this will be very helpful. And let's add here something called store named attribute. Here we will give the name, we will just call it height. We will need to change here to instance, and we will connect the output here of the color to the value here. And we see that now we have our additional column with the height as a parameter. So each point will have a value of the height. This is what we needed. Now let's go back to the layout and just write here height. We see that nothing happens because we haven't assigned this material to our geometry node. So let's go back to the geometry node, and here on the node that we added, we will need to change for the new material. Now we will have the same color of our texture applied on the geometry. You see there are some problems with the ground. We will just move it a bit down. Again, graph set -0, and this will disappear. This is already looking nice. We need to change now these colors, and we need to pick some nice color palette that will represent our heat map, our height map. For this, we will need to add a ColorRamp. And here we can change the colors as we want. Of course, let's look for a meaningful palette, even though this looks already nice. And there is a website that I always recommend, which is called Colors, or Colors with double O. And we can choose one of these nice palettes that are recommended here. For this example, I will choose this one here, and I will add those colors one by one, or a subgroup of them in the ColorRamp. So let's add another color here in the middle, one at 25% and one at 75%. Okay, so now we have added all the colors on the scale on our ColorRamp, and this looks pretty amazing. Let's edit a bit what we have in the material. We will increase the roughness. Let's put 0.6. and metallic 0.5. That 2. Okay. This looks great. Now let's play a bit with the parameters that we have set for the geometry nodes. For example, let's go to the amount of vertices. Here we have 100 times 100, but what if we add 500 times 500? Here on the size, of course, we will need to reduce it 5 times. So we will need to do 0.2 and 0.002 meters, 2 millimeters. And this is how it looks. We have a lot of tiny bars Let's now set our camera. I will probably reduce a bit what we have in the height, set it 0.25. It looks like this, and we can now make some nice render. Just would like to add an additional point light in the center and grab it a bit high so that we can create some kind of shadows in our terrain, our height map, so that we can visualize better all this roughness. Let's keep it like this. I will probably reduce a bit the intensity of the overall lighting so that we can see some shadows here in the ground. Let's add some material to the ground, and that's it. Let's render it. Let me know in the comments if you want me to extend this tutorial and make a second part explaining how to animate this kind of chart and how to use real data from a CSV file. I will continue uploading tutorials like this in the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss it.